All right, this is the debrief video for the meeting on April 12th, regular board meeting for Board of Trustees at 6 p.m. Normal things at the beginning, the call to order, the invocation pledge, roll call, everyone was in session, approval of the agenda, approval of past meeting minutes, went through without adjustments, treasurer's report, no questions. Paying bills, there was a question by one of the nights. They were both sitting on the same side of me because Nola has a leg injury, so she moved on where she was on the board. And they were asking about the breakdown of some of the Amazon orders for maintenance, which we looked at that. I think they're going to send them that information tomorrow, and different purchases. There's a bunch of different things on there. One of the big purchases was for a blade sharpener for lawnmowers and those types of things, and so that ended up being why that was a little higher. There was one purchase, or there was one bill from Amazon that was over $400. The fire department report, Alan had a different meeting that he was at, so I read that. And in March they had a slower month, the slowest month they'd had it in a year. And last year we were obviously setting records, so it's good that little bit of a down cycle there. Planning Commission reports, Lee went over, and several of the things from that were in this meeting. I had 2 judges in attendance. There was also a guy that was coming, that he was there for a little bit, and he's running for county commissioner. He'll come back at a different meeting to introduce himself to people. But we had 2 judges show up. They're running for the same circuit court judge position. Jason Kolkema, and he'd originally messaged me about it before, and he made his case for it. And then Kendra Robinson also came and introduced herself to everyone and said a little bit about it. And they are running for the circuit court positions. I believe a couple of them are up, and you can run for different ones, and I think they're running for the same position. I emphasize that there are no hearings, even though several of these things on the agenda had hearings previously, like the Michelinda resolution, Thunderbird at the Planning Commission, the rezoning at the Planning Commission. There were no hearings happening in this meeting. So if you wanted to talk where the board was going to hear your public comment before the decision was being made, before things were being voted on, to make that in the first public comment. And so we had a number of people talked about multiple things. But a couple of people said that the person, Kevin Richards, that we had the letter for applying for the Maddle position, the Muskegon Area District Library, that he was a good pick for it. One person spoke about the traffic control order on Lakewood Road. 3 people ended up mentioning the Michelinda project, that they were all in favor of it. Thunderbird was mentioned by 4 people, I believe, that they were all in favor of doing the extension that was being heard in here. And then one person mentioned Russell Road, that, well, he wasn't sure on what to do with it to solve the situation. That became quite a discussion at the end of the meeting. So the first decision item was for the library board. And basically what had happened with this is it's normal for the supervisor to end up on it. There's a few township supervisors on the board right now, and the previous supervisor had resigned because he's, for personal reasons, going out west. And so the position was open, and it's no big deal if I end up on the board. I have a library card. I've been to writing groups at the library and this type of thing, so I know some about the system and participate. But I don't think that's necessarily the best policy to have. That is just kind of an automatic thing that boards do. And so I wanted to put it out there, and I talked to the librarians at Dalton and at Montague. Those are the 2 in District 7. The White Lake Library is not in that district. They're not directly part of Maddle. They're associated, but not directly part of it. And so the librarian had said there are a few people that are interested. I wrote up a little thing. We posted it on the website. I sent it to both of the librarians, and we ended up with one letter from a person for that. And he ended up getting approved. So he is, I think, yeah, the next meeting is on the 18th on Monday, so that'll be the first one that he's at. Next, we have Resolution 2022-11 for Michelinda Road, and this is Resolution number 4. In the previous meeting, we had the hearing over this, and we looked at our objections. We had our written objections and discussed the situation here for the finances and everything moving forward, and that ended up passing. There was 6 for, 1 against. The 1 against was just to make people feel better about them being more represented on this. Resolution 2022-12 for the Michelinda bond only makes sense to go with the road, and that passed through. Resolution 22-14 for Thunderbird Raceway. So this was an interesting one, and the board adjusted this. And so no one had any issues with the concessions being open at Thunderbird Raceway, which I'm glad about that. That's no problem. The discussion was over the time, was the controversy on this. And so the idea here is that there's a noise ordinance in place. And actually, as part of this, we brought it up, we're going to review the noise ordinance. And so it's opening up a can of worms. But one of the big problems in government is people aren't willing to open up the can of worms, right? They're not willing to be transparent. They're not willing to bring up the financial issues that exist. And they try to keep these things quiet. And then that is a very slippery slope to go down. And obviously, I have no problem opening up the problems. So they might as well be revealed, and hopefully the truth will out. So I have no problem with that, even though it doesn't always go that way. In this case, the noise ordinance says that normal business activity should not occur after 10 p.m. or before 7 a.m. Now, the special land use for Thunderbird already has them set at 11. Last year, the previous owner, Sprague, had made the request for midnight. The Planning Commission had talked with him about it and ended up setting it at 11:30. This year, the new owner, Blackmer, had requested it to 11:45. Planning Commission discussed it, and the basic arguments are that there's inconsistency then in who you're applying the rules to, which I think is a very legitimate claim, because rule of law is extremely important, and both sides, our political spectrum is absolutely horrible. Essentially, if you think within the conceptual confines of the left and the right, then you don't have a place on your spectrum for freedom. So you lost when you began the argument. So it doesn't work very good. Nevertheless, the entire American public speaks in those terms, and which gives you a good indication of why we're going the way we're going. And this idea, though, on the left and the right of rule of law is really going away in the society, which is very unfortunate, because how do you have individual rights if you don't have rule of law? You don't. But if you have enough laws that you disagree with, then how can you follow the laws? And you can't at a certain point morally. And so it's a very difficult situation, and societies go through these as they're going through very bad periods or in their descent, I would say. And so that's good argument on that side. The argument for is that it's reasonable for the business. It's not reasonable for them to start earlier because of the heat for the drivers and everything, and that there were no official complaints, even though they were able to go to 11:30 last year. And so it was talked about somewhat, and then ended up passing for 11:45. And I believe that went through unanimously. Next, we have Ordinance 2022-03, and this was for a rezoning on property on M120 from R1 residential to C2 commercial, and that ended up passing. Next, we had the senior millage allocation, and we spent $10,000 just over the winter on snowplowing. That was the first time the township had tried that. It seemed to go pretty decent, which left over $17,000 left, and this was applied towards AgeWell's program for safe seniors, which is protecting seniors from scams and going after and trying to pursue the scammers on that as well. Next, we had the Lakewood Road Traffic Control Order, and the basic idea here is that Lakewood Road off of Staple, right, because there's different sections of different roads if they don't connect all the way through. Lakewood Road off of Staple goes into a little subdivision area, and right now that the speed signs say 45, and that was set in 2007 by traffic control order that's issued by the Michigan State Police. Now, the board has to rescind that, the township board, and then the road commission board has to rescind it as well, and then the Michigan State Police can remove it, and I believe there's some discretion at each one of those levels. And hopefully, then if that ends up going through, it triggers a speed study that the speed ends up getting reduced there. And speed studies, there's information on them in the reference packet for this month, April. There is a few pamphlets in there, essentially, about information for speed studies, and they're basically objective measurements and calculations on how they do them. So there doesn't end up being a ton of discretion. And one of the big issues with them is that if you think people are going too fast in wherever the road is, so you want the speed lowered, which is why you trigger a speed study. How they actually do them is they measure how fast people are going, and then they average it out, and then they set it at the 85th percentile. So if people are going too fast, that's why you trigger in the speed study. The speed in that area is going to get raised, and so it's rare that a speed gets lowered unless so many houses go in that there's such a density that that's a different calculation, and then it gets lowered because of that. So hopefully this one goes in a good direction. And it did pass us rescinding it, and then I wrote that up today and gave the road commission what they wanted so that they can consider that as well. We had adding the treasurer to the bank accounts for motions for that went through. Then we had a land bid opening for 5.6 acres on Russell Road. And so the guy that requested it, Cross, he made the argument, and he had a scheduling mishap, so he ended up not being in the meeting itself, but he had written a letter that he'd sent me and I included in the packet. And he ended up making the case that the property's not worth that. Now that's what the realtor appraisal came back as. So there was a fair amount of discussion over this, a fair amount of time on it. And it was brought up that we should maybe be doing it in a different way. And there's a bunch of issues with this. It would make no sense for us to accept the $17,000 bid when we had a $28,000 minimum set, because even if the board did that, we probably wouldn't get sued by someone over that. But now if we set a minimum in the future and someone bids lower and then we reject it for that, if there's enough of a difference, there'd be no reason not to sue us, to say that we're setting precedents that we could do that. And essentially we're negating our own authority for making motions for setting minimum bid prices, which is interesting. And so we didn't do that. We ended up rejecting the bid on this because it was lower than a minimum set, with a discussion and there was discussion about this, about how the prices should be set. And I mean, it can be an arbitrary thing. And when I first came in and I said, the township owns all of this land, and it doesn't seem like that government should just be accumulating a bunch of land, especially with no particular plans of what to do for it. And so there was some of that, some trending in that direction here. And so if a lot of it's going to be sold off, I've been told by some people in the county that you should just pass a thing by the board, that you end up listing it and you negotiate with the people that come in and get it, or list it with a realtor and just make it go through. And I wanted it to be an organic process, that as we sell some, other people are going to hear that we're selling property. They look for some that's available and owned by the township, and they request it up for bid. We can just do this organic process, and that has been working so far. But because you have the politics of a board voting and public meetings where people are hearing the cases and trying to sway board members, then we've had a few issues with pricing and who we're going to sell it to and this type of thing. So it really hasn't worked that well. We have reviewed the policy once to change a few things on where we were publishing it, because it restricted us to either the Chronicle or the White Lake Beacon. I can't remember which one, and I think we added it so we're more flexible on those, and changed a few things that need to be changed in it. No one had brought up changing the bid policy at that point, but it was brought up at this meeting of why aren't we having 3 done on it. And so we're essentially going to increase the cost a lot for people requesting land up for bid right now, because we have to get the appraisal, and we have to do publications and notices to people, and then take out those expenses. And I believe we charge $1,030 for someone requesting a piece of land going up for bid. But the reason that it can be low is because we've been having cheap appraisals so far. Renee was making the case that we should be able to get free appraisals. I don't know how you get people to work for free for that. At first, we were doing appraisals through a guy I know, Charlie Brown, good realtor in the area, and he was just essentially doing me a favor. And I said, but we should be paying you something. We were paying him $50 for each one, and just because he was helping me out, essentially. And so that was useful, but then he stepped on a nail, got an infection in his foot, ended up in the hospital. And so our previous clerk, Kim, she ended up knowing a realtor that we contacted, and they've been doing them for $50 a piece now. And so if we're doing 3 and they're not going to be at $50 a piece, that's just because we knew people and they were willing to do it. And so I've Lexi looking up other places to get bids through and having a hard time getting realtors to do it, and so we might end up with real appraisers. And then for each appraisal, you're obviously, $50 is just this minor little fee, and so you're ending up probably with something between $300 and $500 per appraisal, and that depends if they want to do them, because we're having a little bit of a hard time coming up with that. So we might be up to having actual appraisers, which means you're in that $300, $400, $500 a piece, and some of them charge per parcel. Like this is 4 parcels, and some of them sounds like they'll package them together, so they would do 4 parcels as one, something like that. So if we get 3 of those, then that obviously adds up to a lot more money than we've been spending on those. Essentially add in bureaucracy, which is fine. It's ironic, I think, that the government adds bureaucracy where it's not needed and then doesn't add bureaucracy where it should be added. And we can see it at this low level, and we can see it at every level in between. The state and the feds are very noticeable. And then it was suggested in public comment that we could also do like bid options of when someone's requesting of how many appraisals they want, so we could triangulate a price, something like that, and then have different amounts that you would put in for the deposit for opening up a piece of property for bidding. And so that's possible. Next month I'll bring the policy back to the board to look at changing whatever we want to change, and we can have a more general discussion if we do want to pursue these property sales in a different way, instead of them being a political event each time as they are. It seems like we get one that kind of goes smooth, and then we get one that doesn't go smooth, and then we get one that goes smooth and one that doesn't go smooth, and so we're going to spend a lot of political time, a lot of political fighting over these, which is interesting. I guess it's a fine way to spend time. It seems like we could be doing more important stuff, but that is an important piece of fixing the finances of the township. And I didn't run on fixing the finances of the township or fixing the roads, but those are important things. I ran on increasing freedom, increasing transparency. We record and post meetings. I put these up. I put a ridiculous amount of information into the packets, which I fully publicly post. So super transparent, and then more transparent than anyone else is basically comfortable with. And which I'm fine with. I'm fine with making politicians not comfortable. And then the finances, I can fix them. I think it's not comfortable fixing them, because you have to bring up that there's a bunch of financial issues, and there's a strong tendency in government work to say, oh no, it's no problem, there's no issue, until it's like a disaster, and then say, oh, there's an emergency and we have to do this special stuff because no one saw this coming. And that's what we really have with the sewer system going in now. And so we'll get that sorted out while I'm in office, and it should be in good shape by the time I leave, and the township should be in pretty good financial shape by the time I leave overall. And it's fine, and the land sales are part of sorting that out, so it's important. And we're working on other good stuff too, on the things I actually want to work on, due process and local agricultural rights and things like those. So we had the second public comment, and the case was made for bidding options. And then there was one comment about the horse trail, people riding it at night, if we should limit that and put hours and hour limits on the park itself. And so we can consider that. No one seemed too concerned with it. No one followed up with me after the meeting, and so there was just the one public comment on it. I assume they ride at night because it's interesting. You probably can't ride too many places at night with headlamps, and then it goes near someone's house is where the trail is, and so disturbs them. And that was the question there. And I originally thought about putting together a Parks and Recreation Committee early on, because I know some things need to be done on the parks, and there's going to be a fight among the board for money from ARPA through the feds, right? Which is, everyone likes spending the money, and all I can think of when I see it is the destruction of the American economy, because it should not work like that. The money should not flow in that way. But nevertheless, it is. And the issue with establishing Parks and Rec is then it creates the rules that you have to make for that, the appointments that you have to make for that, the budget that you have to make for that. So then there's another layer, there's another thing to manage, another entity, and another place to have conflict and infighting. And so it probably really wouldn't smooth things out. It would be nice to have some of these things in place and being handled, but they have to be handled at the board level eventually, most likely anyways. You can establish a Parks and Recreation Committee that gets directly elected, but then you end up with them having this huge incentive to always spend money on the parks with essentially an unlimited budget, because they're not trying to balance it against the other things, the other concerns in the budget. So probably not ideal, so I didn't follow up with creating a Parks and Recreation Committee, and we'll probably just run those things directly through the board. And that's what occurred in that meeting on the 12th. So we've got the meeting coming up in May, and there'll be big things on there, specifically some of the sewer things I want to get arranged and get onto that. I did follow up with the road commission about Michelinda, which got approved on here in the time frame, and someone had asked in the meeting about when it was going to happen. And I had said it in the meeting that I think they were waiting to see if this gets approved before they put it on their schedule officially. And that is correct. But it sounds like they are planning on doing it this year. And I told them to hopefully be ready to plan on doing it this year, because it would not be ideal to leave that until next summer. And so they are working on getting to me with an official time schedule for when that is going to get done. And so that's the way everything rolled out. If anyone has any questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out. On April 20th at 6 p.m. at the Township Hall, I am having a session for Attack Jeff on Anything. And I guess maybe I'll do a brief on that. We'll see, I might not. And it's one of a trilogy. It's the third one of a trilogy. I did a session of Ask Jeff Anything, and then Debate Jeff on Anything, and now Attack Jeff on Anything. And it's really open. It's my politics, my religion, any personal views, anything anyone wants, philosophy, history, literature, and all the way from the village, township, county, state, nation, international politics, anything anyone wants to come debate or just attack my position on. A lot of my information's out there, jeffthinks.com. I've written hundreds of articles, and so seems like, put out a bunch of videos with a bunch of information, and I've released all of these government packets that have my briefs in them, so a lot of my views are out there. And if anyone would like to point out some of the weaknesses in those, then that would be a worthy discussion to deliberate on, and I'll look forward to that. Otherwise, anything else, feel free to let me know. Thanks. Bye.